Welcome to another episode of Rebel Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Katie.
And I am your other host, Michelle. Welcome.
And we have a wonderful guest today. She is a registered social worker / psychotherapist, and we are very excited to have a chat. So, Sophia, why don't you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Katie, for having me. My name is Sophia Okyere-Oduro. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm very excited to have a wonderful chat with you two.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We're so happy to have you on the pod with us today. So we would love to hear from, us, like we sit around, the two of us, talking to each other as registered psychotherapists, / friends. And so we have sort of a shared context, I would argue. And one of the reasons that Michelle and I decided to start this podcast is we thought, okay, so from a personality perspective, from a style perspective, we're quite different, and I would say quite complementary. But I would also say that we come from a very similar kind of shared background, right? I think sometimes it's interesting to have a conversation with somebody and I kind of get where she's coming from, whatever. What we wanted to do by bringing guests onto the pod is to really be able to showcase alternative perspectives to things. And some of the people we've had before are not in the mental health space. And so it's exciting, I think, for us to have you as a fellow psychotherapist come in with a slightly different perspective, especially being a social worker, and then maybe from a cultural perspective as well, having different experiences. So can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you decided to do this work and what you love about it?
It's been a journey. Sometimes I stay away from the word journey, but it really has been for me. I started out I think going back, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I really gravitated towards justice and advocacy work. And through undergrad, that was my goal. After undergrad, I did my undergrad in Windsor, and I took the LSAT, which is the law school entry exam. And I did okay, but not good enough to get into any of the Ontario schools. And my parents were just like, yeah, we're not paying for no American private school. So you better figure this out for yourself. I said, okay, ditto. So I came back home. For those who are listening who have African parents, they can definitely relate. When African parents say no, it's a no. There's no negotiating. So I came back home and decided I didn't really know what to do. I think I use the analogy of like being a balloon, just floating with no direction, just kind of going wherever the wind took me. And my partner asked me, like, what do you want to be a lawyer? Which I guess I've never really thought about, but I think I said advocating and share my knowledge and showing up for people that look like me. And that's what really drives me. And then he said, well, you could do that besides law. And for whatever reason, I guess I didn't really think about it, but like, yeah, I can. So I started going through a career journey. I started working in brain injury, acquired brain injury. From brain injury, I learned about concurrent disorders. And I learned that a lot of folks that have brain injury also unfortunately struggle with their mental health at times and pre-existing conditions with mental health. So that led me to taking a concurrent disorder certificate with CAMH, which then led me to working in, brain injury all the time. Pardon their expression, but I used to say I was balls deep in brain injury. It was just brain injury and mental health all the time. And then,
for those people who aren't from Toronto, can you just tell us what CAMH is? It's a pretty preeminent institution.
Yeah, the Center for Addictions and Mental Health. And it's one of the renowned hospitals in Canada. Their work is mental health, all forms of mental health, mood disorders. They have a residential program. They have inpatient, outpatient. It's a great facility. It's also a learning institution. So they offer a lot of certificate programs and also post-degree programs also. So that's why my mental health knowledge started from there. I worked a lot in mental health for a long time, trying to figure out where I fit in. And then I started working for an all-female organization. And I never really thought about private practice. I never thought about getting my master's. And one of the social workers there said to me, you should get your master's. And I'm like, and do what with it? And
why though?
It's like, what would I do with a master's in social work? And then she shared with me her knowledge and her wisdom of her experience. I'm like, okay, yeah, I could do this. And so I applied for my master's and I got in. I did my master's at University of Laurier while still working a lot of work, but we got through it. Through that, I learned that not only do I love advocacy and ensuring that Black folks have information to mental health and access to mental health, and also kind of debunk some of the myths about mental health, I also learned that access to services differently. as somebody who's been a mental health provider and somebody who's also accessed mental health, the knowledge I have really helped them. But that's my knowledge. What about other people that don't have that knowledge? So I made it part of, like, I guess I don't say life mission, but always share my knowledge with others, especially elders in our community or young folks coming up, like letting them know that mental health is not a scary thing. Some of us unfortunately go through it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be your life journey. It may be a moment in time for you. Through that, after I finished my master's, I started my private practice, trying to support my community, especially young Black girls. I think that sometimes the world can be scary and we're positioned to either know it all, and sometimes you don't know it and you need somebody else to give you a helping hand. So I kind of look at myself as a person that gives people a helping hand, trying to figure out the system. My role is not to fix you. My
Nope.
role is to help you, walk with you through your journey. And when you say you got it, and then I back away. I hope that kind of answers your question without rambling too much.
No, it was beautiful. Thank you. I've got lots of questions actually. But first question, I guess I would ask, so is that sort of your key demographic, your preferred demographic?
I think it wasn't intentional, but
Yeah.
it kind of happened organically. I think through my
Okay.
community, because initially when I started, I shared my profile on Psychology Today with my community, and my community shared other people. So we kept on sharing amongst ourselves, and then that's how my clientele kind of started, and it just became young Black women. But I can work with anybody. It's
Yes.
just right now, that's just the women that I support are all Black women.
So it's just sort of organically grown up that way. That's so interesting.
Exactly.
Michelle and I have talked about that before, about how it's, sometimes I think we decide, all right, we need a demographic, we need to like determine our demographic. But my experience has been that the demographic almost comes to you and then becomes sort of clarified, right? You sort of find yourself working with the right people, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's also been very helpful because it's helped me adapt modalities to my community. And sometimes just, it's not even about modalities. It's been sometimes most of my work has been folks are showing up. There's no quote unquote diagnostic, and they're showing up and they need a space to talk, a space to kind of, I call it untangling whatever they need to untangle in their life. And I'm there with them. Right. So it's been very, very nice to be in that space. At first I thought I wasn't doing it properly because it wasn't how I was taught.
As much? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And I try to like fit folks into the way that I thought therapy should be. And then I was
Mm-hmm.
like, why? Don't be a salmon. Go with the flow.
What are you doing?
So yeah, and so it's been really, really amazing that way.
So it sounds a little bit to me like what you're saying is that in real time, you've been experiencing that, the therapeutic alliance that actually Michelle and I talk about quite a lot really is, I think, the predictor of best outcomes, right? So to your earlier point, modality is interesting. And I think it's interesting the way we work anyway is to gear it toward the individual needs. But really at the end of the day, it's the relationship that grows up between the therapist and that is the really important intervention, so to speak. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's been one of my biggest learning since going to private practice, is that the connection with like the relationship between the therapist and the service user. I always kind of preface our sessions or our intro sessions to let them know that I can't solve their problems. I'm not here to judge you. I can't even the only person I know is myself. Right.
Right.
So however you show up is the person I'm going to see you as. And we worked from that, and it's worked out very well, because I think oftentimes as Black women, we kind of have to show up as a certain type of ourselves. We have to put on the face, as folks, if we have Black listeners who understand, and you don't have to put on the face. Show up as whoever you are, as you are. And I think that allows me too, because I don't have to show up as anything but myself also. So it's been very reciprocal, and it's been amazing to grow as a therapist in that way with my folks, because it's organic and there's no pretending.
I'm curious about, for you, like, how has that learning come about to not put on the face, like when that feels safe to do that, like in your professional life and your personal life. And it sounds like in your professional life, it's been like a symbiotic kind of thing that sort of happened with your clients, right? Where it's like it's something you're both maybe able to drop together, right? And then, yeah, so I'm just kind of curious how that's been through your professional journey or personal, however you want to approach it.
It's not always easy, to be honest. I think that comes with expectations, and I think the label of seeing a therapist comes with perceived identity of who people think a therapist should look like, how a therapist should speak. And I also struggle with that. So I think most of the time, what has happened is maybe after our third or fourth session, I can sense my folks relaxing and I'm relaxing, right? And sometimes, like, because most of my folks I support are young Black women, culturally, we like there's just certain things that we will say, and you can just right away be like, okay, all right, we're good. And then we continue that conversation. But I also have had folks that prefer the professional boundary setting where they like, and I have to be respectful of that. So it doesn't always work out where we're both just, I'm sitting there with my leg up and then we're just chatting away. Some folks like they need that, I guess, professionalism for them to feel like they're coming for help. And also I think also it makes them, it's a protective factor for them, right? They want to, so it just depends on the person I'm working with, depends on the relationship we build, and also depends on like their comfort level, right? And so I'm always aware and I try to kind of let my folks lead. Whatever way they show up is how I show up.
Yeah. It's funny, I work a lot with teenagers and often will ask them, especially after a first session, I'll say, so tell me the truth. Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be? And usually they're like, oh my God, no, it wasn't nearly as terrible. I'm like, okay, cool. Right? Because the whole idea is that for me, I want to help them get as comfortable as possible. And it's different, I think, when you're working with a young person versus somebody who's older who may have more perceptions about what therapy is or what it's supposed to be, or has spent more time in the world putting on that face, whatever that is for them. Whereas a teenager, what I love about teenagers is they haven't figured it out yet for the most part. And sometimes I can sort of like sneak in there and they don't even put it on. And it's lovely. It's lovely for me. So I'm curious for you, it sounds like you fairly adeptly move between those different circumstances, right? You're able, if I heard you right, you're able to really adjust to what the individual client needs from you in that moment in terms of the structure of the therapeutic experience. And I'm just curious, is there a preference that you have, or do you sort of find enjoyment in all the different ways?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think because as a Black woman, I worked in non-Black spaces for so long, like my professional self has always like takes over, right? So I have to work really hard to adjust to my authentic self when I'm supporting folks. And it's very easy to me to be the professional that I think a therapist should be. But I also recognize that that's not me being authentic, and I'm asking folks to be authentic. So I can't ask for something that I'm not willing to kind of give in return. So I try to be authentic within a professional setting as possible. When I get nervous, I tend to say inappropriate things. So I let them know, like I may say something that's totally like random. Please, like, I think that kind of like those
Bear
little
with me.
icebreakers. Yeah, bear with me. I may say a curse word here and there. Sorry about that. I think especially when you work with young Black women, it makes them feel, at least from my experience, like we are the same. Oftentimes, it's hard to work with older folks for me because I look so young. So they question whether or not I have the experience to speak upon what I'm speaking. Right. So it becomes challenging a bit, but that also has been interesting because part of me wants to prove that I'm old enough or professional enough to support them. But sometimes I have learned to, as I continue to support an authentic space, they come to see my strengths. They come to see the validity of what I'm saying. And then it works out, right? So I don't have to try. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something that I always find interesting and sometimes challenging in the client-therapist relationship is how do you make it as least non-hierarchical as possible while still respecting that you actually have more authority in the situation and that they're coming with more vulnerability because they're sharing their experiences and what they're struggling with, and I'm not sharing mine back. It's not like an equal exchange, and they're coming to me for help, so there's a vulnerability in that. But at the same time, like you said, I'm not an expert on your life. I don't know what it feels like to be you. Like, I know about therapy, you know about your life. Like, how do we put that together to help you as much as possible? But I think it can be a challenge. And like you said, it takes time. It takes some trust and those kind of layers you're saying that you have to kind of like drop as you get to know each other. Yeah, it takes time.
It does. And I don't know about for Katie or Michelle, if you've had that experience where a client has asked you a question and you're like, oh, should I answer this authentically or should I just answer as a therapist? And I get that a lot. And I've had to learn a fine balance of not being too authentic because then it's like I should not come to you because you don't have anything figured out.
So I have a trick actually when people do that to me,
You
which
share.
nobody seems to have figured out yet. So now I'm like giving away my tricks if anybody's listening. But I'll usually say, because usually they're asking a really, like, it's often they're asking for advice. Like, oh, I should do this, or should, like, I want to know, like, you should tell me, like, tell me what you think I should do, whatever. And I'll always say something like, well, I definitely have an opinion, but I'm much more interested in why you're asking. I always turn around, right? Like, that's super interesting. I could tell you for sure, but why is it important to you that I give you an answer? What does that mean to you? And then usually I can deflect them. And I mean, sometimes I will give them my opinion, but not about advice, right? So I can say, listen, this is what I think. If you're really curious, I'll tell you, but I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you how to fix yourself. I actually kind of have a problem with that whole construct. I don't think it is about fixing, it's about supporting. To your earlier point, Michelle, like, I know about therapy, but you know about you. And I usually say that to clients as well. It's like, so this is a collaborative experience. I can help you. I can teach you things. I can teach you some skills and about self-support and that kind of thing. But the work, like, you have to do the work. I can't do the work for you. So just sort of direct it back to them. And often they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know why I'm asking that question. And then there's more that we can explore.
I like that idea. I hope you don't mind me to borrow that.
No, take it. And then, yeah, tell me how it goes.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious, like, did you mean partially, Sophia, like, how much do you kind of self-disclose, like, in terms of, like, when people are asking you, like, are you married? Like, do you do this? Or, like, because sometimes I think people, like, want to know about you. It's a natural instinct, like, having curiosity, and, like, how do you gauge how much you should tell somebody and when, I think is a delicate balance. Is that what you were referring to as well?
Yes, yes, that also, thank you, Michelle. That also, because I think that sometimes, I don't know if it's just me, but like some of my folks will like really ask me, like, so what did you like? What do you like? What's going on with you? Are you dating? Are you married? Like those personal
Wow, really?
questions, the authentic relationships I try to have with my folks, and
Yeah.
that, and like we have our dialogue and how we speak, and like I think sometimes my folks see me as their therapist, but also like a peer in a way.
Yeah.
I think, and also because I try to like speak as plainly without using any therapeutic jargon as much as
Oh,
possible.
I love that.
So it kind of like that. And I'm always conscious about the power imbalance. And like I'm always about power sharing. And I really am conscious about letting the person I'm supporting hold the power as much as possible and only inserting my opinion or a modality I think you should try or something you should try if it's absolutely needed. Right. So I think that creates a different dynamic. I'm just like, huh, how do I answer this? Right. I don't want our session to be about me. And at the
No.
same time, as I said earlier, you're coming with such vulnerability and you're sharing your thoughts or your experiences that you may not share with anybody else. So how dare me you ask a question and I can't give you something in return.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm immediately curious about these clients and what's going on with them, because something that comes up for me sometimes, and it's partly to do with demographic, I think, but also maybe just personal style. A lot of what you say really resonates. And I'm thinking, oh, I try to create a similar kind of environment. But often it'll occur to me, I'll get the sense from my client and I'll ask them, I'm like, it really feels like you're trying to take care of me, either take care of me or direct this session, right? And often they've never really been called out on that, and called out a little bit aggressive. I wouldn't do it in an aggressive way, but it's often, I think, really interesting to come at it from that perspective. So the content of what they're asking is not that interesting to me. It's much more, that's a really interesting question that you're asking. And what is behind that? Like, what are you actually attempting to do here? Because even as you voiced the question, my whole body was like, whoa, that's too much information, like, to be asked. And so I'm just thinking of times that I've been with a client where I've felt that. And then it's about that sort of Gestalt work, both Gestalt therapists, right? So from that sort of felt sense, like, what is my body reacting to? And can I bring that into the session? And then often we uncover things like, they're nervous, they're vulnerable. So their way is to try to direct things, right? Or they're not sure they believe in therapy. And so they're trying to trip me up to see if I have the right answers. And it's really just about trust or whatever else. But it's such an interesting way into some depth, maybe, in the work that you're able to do with your clients.
Yeah, and I hear like there is that delicate part of it, right? Where it's like you don't want to shut them down and you don't want to be
No,
like, that's a wrong question to ask or be like
that was
offended or
inappropriate.
whatever.
No.
Yeah, but it's like sometimes I will say, like, it depends what somebody asks me, but like sometimes I will say, I will answer that, but I'm curious what made you
Yeah,
ask that right now. You know,
exactly.
we were talking about this, kind of drawing attention to the question and not even in a way to evade or to put it back on them in any accusatory way, but just to be
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, like you tried to really make it about me for a second. Like, why? Like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have similar approach. Most of the time, when I find myself being asked questions that I always wonder, like I kind of preface by saying, like, I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm just curious
Yes.
to see like what made you decide to ask me this question. Does whether or not if experience what you're going through, does that change how you're gonna like are working together? And I think sometimes,
Love
as you
that.
mentioned, Michelle, it's more like a gauge to see where I stand on certain things, right? Without indirectly asking. It's like a very loaded question with the answer is not really important to them, but like how I answer. For me, that I've
Mhm.
come to realize how I answer, and if they think that I'm being authentic with them. I think that's been my experience so far, and it's been a learning experience for me. And I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. And then I kind of just put in the back of my pocket. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, it's also for me when those kinds of questions come up, it also gives me insight into the person I'm working with,
Mhm.
right? Because sometimes, and I'm sure you both know, what people say and like in the beginning and when they say it towards like once their guards are down or the conversation becomes more fluid, it may be different. So
Yes.
I pick up on those things and I don't necessarily hold that against them, but I keep that in my mind for future conversations and to see like how maybe there's just a nervous thing or defense mechanism, or maybe they're challenging me, but in a good way to make sure that I'm being authentic to this relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things about the therapeutic space is that people show up often the way they show up in the world, right? So often
Mm-hmm.
that question, at least in my experience, is it's how they've learned to be with people and whatever they think I am, right? As a therapist, as a woman of a particular age, as whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But they look at me and they have their ideas and then they've learned to show up in a certain way. And what I love about it is that we can, with compassion and support, really kind of look at some of those strategies, right? And help
Exactly.
them become even more authentic, and we can do it in a way that just doesn't happen out in the world. So I actually find
Exactly.
it quite interesting because it's like, oh, you've just shown me how you operate in these particular sorts of circumstances, and that tells me so much about where you might be coming from and what the intention is underneath all the things, right? And so it's
Exactly.
such a great opportunity to get into that with someone, I think.
That's been a really unique experience for me. It's been a learning lesson. And sometimes that's why I question, like, am I doing it right? I wonder if they ask other therapists that question. Like, I'm always wondering, like, I wonder if they ask, and then I'll go to like a supervisor. Has anybody asked you? They're like, no. They're like, your folks ask you such interesting questions. I'm like, I don't know. I guess so. Like, I don't know why they do, but let's keep it coming. Okay, let's keep on going.
I love it.
Yeah,
I
like it
love it.
speaks to like the field that you're creating with them, right? Like how they show
Mhm.
up like with you
Yes.
is indicative of how they show up in the world, but it's something about your unique approach as a therapist that they're comfortable trying out these strategies or
Yeah.
showing you more quickly how they are in the world.
I think so too. And I think, especially when I work with young Black girls or Black girls in their 20s or just trying to navigate through life, I think their perception of therapists and of therapy is very dependent on TV or social media. Me being me and coming as myself, as, like aesthetically, how I look, how I speak, it
Yeah.
really kind of debunks their ideology of what therapist should be. And they don't know what to do with that. So some of them are embrace it and they're embrace this like me, like, oh, okay. And then some of them with that unconsciously, they're a bit challenging, but because I'm not what they thought a therapist should be at all. And to your point earlier, Katie, about like, when you ask your folks, like, it wasn't as bad, was it? Like that, like they're expecting it to be a certain way. And whatever the expectation is, or what, I'm not that. So they don't know what to do
Yes.
with it. Right. So
Yes. Yeah.
I also recognize that a lot.
You know, I'll say to my teenagers especially, it's like, listen, we're just here to talk to each other, and I'll do my best to just not make it weird. And they're like, oh, okay, thank God. It's
I
like,
love
and I
it.
don't know
I
what
love
they
it.
thought it was going to be coming in, but they thought it was going to be weird. I'm like, no, I get it, absolutely. But also, no, it doesn't have to be like that. We're just
I
having a
love it.
conversation, man. Chill out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it is can be intimidating, right? Especially if you've never been to therapy before. It's hard enough to describe the experience, like if you haven't been in it, to be like what therapy is or what it's like. So it makes sense that people would be a little bit intimidated. I'm curious for you, Sophia, what do you find most young Black women have the perception of a therapist as being? Like, I don't want you to speak for anybody, but like everybody, but like just in your experience, like what are they kind of expecting?
I think from my experience, like it's the opposite of me. Like,
What does that
and
mean?
So an
I
old
mean,
white
like
woman?
aesthetically, well, I think like
Yep.
they expect a therapist to really be formal and be
Mhm.
more rigid and not be like in that kind of go with the flow kind of thing. And sometimes like my folks will say something and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that. But like, you do? And they're like, oh, okay. Because I think they forget in the summertime, especially, I have tattoos, obviously I have piercings, so that also throws them off. I remember one session, one of the young women I was working with, she was in her room and her mom popped in. She told her mom she had a therapy session. We were talking about something. I made a comment. She started laughing really hard. And her mom thought she was just talking to one of her friends. And then her mom is like, I thought you said you had therapy. He's like, I do. And then she showed her phone to her mom and I waved. I was like, she doesn't look like a therapist. And it was like, oh,
Okay.
you're okay. Right. So
Yeah.
like I think like that piece also works off and it works out to my advantage because I help to really break the ice, right? But I think this idea that like a therapist is supposed to be rigid and this and that, and like just the misconception that social media, TV
Ugh.
has of like being perfect, right? A therapist
Mm.
will have all your answers, have the solution to your problem. You're gonna after one session, you're gonna be fixed and you're gonna feel like a new person.
Right.
And
Like you're
so
the one who's messy, but the therapist has
yes,
it all worked out. Perfect
all work
individual, right? Totally sanitized. Yeah. No.
exactly. That I think that within itself throws people off. And so yeah, and then that from there is just everything else. But it's been interesting.
I love it.
Yeah, it
That's
sounds like
awesome.
you show up in a way that feels real to them. And I think like that's one of the kind of the core things of Gestalt therapy. Oh my God, now that really threw me off. What were we even talking about?
Possibly tattoos and I don't know, wearing shorts. I always wear shorts.
Oh,
People are like,
yeah, sorry,
what?
being real.
Like, yeah, it's summer. What do you want? I'm not gonna wear formal clothes. I work for myself. That's the point. I can do whatever I want.
Love
Sorry,
it.
what I was going to say is like something that Katie and I often say is that like we try to be as human as possible, right? It's like, yes, I'm not going to put down the role of a therapist because that's what keeps like the container of the session and what keeps like the client safe. But it's like, I'm going to show up as me as a therapist, right? And I'm a human person who is not perfect by any means, right? And yeah, like I feel like it does lower barriers quickly and it allows somebody to be like, oh, this isn't that scary, but also like I can feel your humanity. I can feel like your empathy more. Like there's like just this real sense. And that was the first therapist who connected with me, who was a Gestalt therapist. That's why I went into this. My therapist, it was the first person I connected with because I just felt like she was a real person. Like and I could like feel her more fully in the room with me and just like showing up with like a certain level of presence while still like holding the therapist thing. And I'd never experienced that before. And that was transformative for me.
That's awesome. I remind myself that, what I try to do is hold space for folks. And when we live in a world where not a lot of space is like you can carve out an hour for yourself. And so
Mhm.
it's really important for me to ensure that the time we're spending together, we are both gaining something from this in terms of just having a conversation with another Black woman where there's no judgment. There's not, here's what I think you should do, or all the expectations of like, there's none of that. And the more I can practice that with my folks, my hope is that then they can also practice that outside of therapy, right?
Yes.
And where they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to, they can have authentic conversations. It's not combative, it's
No.
safe, right? So I think that, like, even with my girlfriends, when we talk, I always find myself be in the where people just tell me things. And I just like, okay. And I'm like, I take it as because I don't judge. I don't really tell you what to do. If he asks for my opinion, I may give it, but he doesn't have to go that way. And where, as my sister says, you're my safe space. Like, and sometimes like I wish I wasn't your safe space, but okay, let's go with
So
that.
much, right?
But I really want to be part of that safe space building like community for them.
Yeah.
And like, it's
Yes.
not like I'm sure like maybe Katie with teenagers maybe the same, but like there isn't a lot of safe space for folks to really
No.
like help them untangle things that they want to untangle. They don't have to, at least with my folks, but they're choosing to. So if you're
That's
choosing
right.
to untangle this, let's create a space where you authentically can do that without any fear of judgment or reprisal or anything like that.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And especially with teenagers, right? I mean, a lot of it, the initial part typically is them pushing to see, first of all, if I'm real. And second of
Mm-hmm.
all, if I know what I'm talking about, and they don't care about the content, they just want to know that I can like take it, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's done very respectfully, but I know that I have so little time to show up because so many of them have been let down by adults before, right? Adults who are supposed to know what they're doing. Adults are, I mean, look at the world. Like adults are,
Mm-hmm.
there are not a lot of adults around, it would seem, right? And so they're already
Yes.
predisposed to disappointment. And so my job, I mean, I can be messy for sure, but I need to know my shit. That occurred to me as you were talking, the ability to show up authentically in a therapy space and let it evolve organically requires us to really know our jobs, right? And to be confident in the ability. So, I mean, I know I might make mistakes with you, but I also know I'm a really good therapist. So I can kind of relax and sit back and just be with my clients as a person. And to your point,
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, a person who is also a therapist. It's not one or the other, it's actually both. And I think for me, it reminded me as you were talking, like for me, practicing this career has been about integration. I love the work partly because I can show up as a fully integrated human being. And I think that's what people respond to. Like, they don't even have to be the same necessarily. I think of my first really great therapy experience. I was like 22, and it was some old dude who used to be a banker and had gone back to school to like be a therapist. And I mean, he was probably 60, right? We had nothing in common, absolutely nothing in common. And he was transformative for me because he was just a person and he knew his shit. And it was amazing. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it sounds like we have similar experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I just thought about my first therapist, like my real, like I've had not so good ones, but my really good one was similar to you. It was a random white man in his 60s. He was retired. He used to be an NDP candidate. Like he was an amazing human being for me. And I get asked, like, why do you have private practice? I think about him. And I'm like, there's a moment in my life where my bottom fell and I had like I just the person I thought I was going to be was not the person I became, and the person I thought I was going to spend my life with didn't. Like, in Black communities we have a saying, I don't know if other communities have it too, it's like we make plans and God laughs. So I made
Yeah.
plans and
Yeah.
God said, "Oh, haha, joke's on you,
Nope.
that's not how it's going to be." And so I went to him, and like I had to work my way through finding him, and it was so transformative for me because
Hmm.
it was it wasn't even a lot of question asking. It was just he just created space for me, right?
Yeah.
I remember one time I was talking to him, and it said something. I'm like, "Oh, what do you think? What do you think about blah 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 blah?" And I vividly remember him saying, "Sophia, you have the answers. You have the answers. Like you keep on
You tell
asking,
me.
but you have the answers. So why don't you try one of the answers that you have and see how
Love it.
that goes for you?" And I was just like, okay. And it never occurred,
I
like,
know.
because
I know.
I once again, like, I thought he's gonna have the answers for me, but to put the ownership back on me, as Michelle has said, your life, right? And that for me was, I always remember that, and I remind myself, and I tell my folks, I don't have the answers to your life, you do. My role is to help you untangle some of the answers and maybe a clear path, but I
Yes.
don't have the answers at all, right? And like that has stayed with me, and that has informed how I support folks too. So yeah, we all have that in common.
I love
Yeah,
that.
like importance, like what you're hitting on too is the importance of them having faith in you, right? Like them believing that you have the answers, right? I think that's part of the equation. Yes, you do have the answers. I think that's true in a lot of cases, right? But it's like them being like, no, you've got this. Like, I've got your back, but also like, you've got this, you've got you, right? And for you to actually like believe that in the moment. I think it can be really transformative for sure.
Yeah, especially when you're in a space where you don't believe in yourself. You don't think you
Yes.
have the answer. You don't feel like you can make good decisions for yourself, right? To have somebody else that you've grown to have respect for, you've grown to
Yeah.
admire, tell you have the answers. For me, it was all I needed. So yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
And I am curious, like, so you've obviously had that experience of like connecting with someone who like demographically is quite different from you, right? And like the
Hmm.
person showing up as just like a human person was what you needed in that moment. And then it sounds like you also create space like for other Black women to show up in a similar demographic and like how important that is. And I guess I'm curious, as you sort of said, like you've had bad therapists too, and I don't know if you want to go into it too much, but like where you felt like they didn't show up as human, or like, I guess I'm more interested in terms of like, what do you hope people kind of take from that experience of like when therapists show up poorly, essentially?
From my experience in the beginning of my session with new folks after intake, I let them know at any point you're in charge. At any point, if this doesn't work for you, you can break up with me. And I'm okay with it. Right. And I make it very clear that we're not like, just like dating, you have to date a few people to find your person. Therapy is the same way. You may have to see a different types of therapists to find the person that works for you. I may not be your person, or I may be your person for a short amount of time, and then you may want to go somewhere else. That's absolutely fine. Like, I'm not going to take it personally, because you're an evolving person, right? And I learned that from my own experience. I remember having a therapist that tried to sell me vitamins, and I was just like, what? Like, they insisted that if I took these vitamins, all my concerns would go away. And I was just like, I actually called the college. I was like, yeah, no, this
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
okay.
Super
No,
weird.
this is
Not
not
okay.
okay. You can't be telling people this,
No.
right? And so I've had therapists that really try to get me to commit to a
Yes.
long-term plan with them. And
Mm,
I'm just like, I don't even know what I'm going to
Mm-mm.
do next month. Why are you asking me to, like, it's like, and that power imbalance. So I've had all of those experiences, and I'm grateful for those experiences because just like my positive experience with my therapist, those not so pleasant experience has informed my practice also. So
Yeah.
I'm always checking in with myself. I'm always checking in with my folks. I'm always being very conscientious that I'm not imposing my will on anybody.
That feels like an important learning for people to know as they're looking for a therapist, or even if they have a therapist right now, right? Like if your therapist is never checking in with you, how things are going, or if you're like that, you can check in with yourself, right? Like that you're the ultimate kind of authority. If it doesn't feel right, it might not be right, that it's safe to kind of
Hmm.
question that. And I think like that power imbalance where they think like, oh, well, maybe they know best.
Hmm.
And you might have to learn like through these bad experiences, right? Of like where it's like so off the charts where you're like, why are you selling me vitamins? This has nothing to do with therapy, to make it kind of blatant that this is the wrong fit.
And I always think about like, what happens to people that go into space when they don't feel they have the agency to push
Hmm.
back, and like, and
Exactly.
how terrible that must be for that person. And so maybe it's through my own lived experience. Now that I'm thinking and speaking, maybe it is. I'm always conscientious of that, ensuring that if we're working together, you have the agency to do whatever you want to do. And
Yeah.
so, like, it's a service. I'm providing a service. If my service is not good enough, we cannot continue the service, right? If you go to a restaurant and you get bad customer service, you don't have to go back, right?
That's
Like,
right.
you shouldn't go back. You should never go back there ever again. So I'm so aware of that maybe I do too much, but I'm always like, if you don't like this, I'm not breaking up with you, but if you don't like this, you can
No.
leave.
So I always tell people at the very beginning, I'm like, listen, in the sort of first session or whatever, I'll say, listen, I'll ask you questions, and I'm usually pretty good about not pushing it too far. But if I ever ask you anything you don't want to talk about, just tell me. You can just tell me
Hmm.
no. And sometimes I see them go, oh my God, I forgot that was an option. It's like, yeah, that's always an
Right?
option. You can say, absolutely, I don't want to talk about this. Right. And then I'll also say, like, therapy can feel like a stretch, but it shouldn't be painful. It's kind of like being at the
Mm-hmm.
gym, right? Like if it
Mm-hmm.
hurts, it's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be, you know? Yeah, that's so important. I love that.
So before we end, I wanted to talk about the beginning of how you came to be on the podcast. So it was like through a friend of mine, and you're her colleague. I guess she was telling you about our podcast one day and just saying she liked it. And then you kind of said like, oh, well, if they ever want like the perspective of a Black therapist, like I'm happy to come on. And so she had passed that on to me, and she shared your contact, and like I reached out and was like, yeah, definitely, let's talk. And then when we spoke on the phone, you were saying like, you were kind of saying that offhandedly, and that when it became more real, you were like, oh no, like I don't know that I feel qualified to speak about this. And then you were like, no, I do, or like I want to, or like I want to try, like I don't know, just telling me kind of like your side of that experience.
Yeah, it was exactly that. It was so our mutual friend, we started as colleagues almost 10 years ago when I used to work in mental health and housing. And we became very, very, very good friends. She's one of my closest friends. We share the same birthday. So that's that. And so when she was telling about your podcast, I cheekily just said, oh yeah, you guys they need a Black therapist there. No problem. Never thinking that, like, because I say a lot of shit, never thinking that she's actually going to follow up.
Awesome.
And I was just like, what? And then so when she shared your contact with me, Michelle, instinctively I started laughing like real life LOL. Like I just laughed out loud so hard. And then my armpits started sweating. I was like, and I was just like, no. And I in my head, I was like, I know. I started thinking of other people, other Black therapists that could take my spot. Right. And this year I've told myself that I'm gonna live bravely. I'm gonna just live bravely, make brave decisions and not be scared. So I was like, you know what? No, we're gonna do this. Right. But instinctively, I thought I wasn't good enough. So not good enough to share space with you folks, not good enough to speak up on my lived experience, not good enough to speak about my professional experience, just not good enough. Not knowing anything about you folks, I just automatically thought that I wasn't going to be good enough for this space. Right. And I've come to realize that imposter syndrome is layered in so many different ways. I had lunch with one of my other good friends somewhere in beginning of March. And to me, she is one of the most brilliant and amazing. When you say amazing women, to me, she's one of the people I think about. And then we were talking about imposter syndrome. It's like, yeah, she has it too. I'm like, what? You have it?
Okay.
Are you out of your mind? You are like the baddest bitch I know. How can you have it? And then so we talked about that. And with her, it's not even a race thing, it's a gender thing, right? Because she is a white woman, a white European woman. And she's just like, no, she operates in space with men all the time. So she always feels like she's not, so I thought about that and like and lead up to this conversation, how much imposter syndrome shows up for women. And like I don't know if it shows up for other men and how we have to be in order to enter a space. I don't know if it's just socialized or through education, but we have to check off all the boxes before we can enter a space. Whereas men,
That's right.
exactly, and whereas
Yeah.
men, from my experience, may only check off one box, and yet they feel like they own the space, right? And it's just like, I wonder, like where that started. I don't know if it's socialized. I don't know what it is, but it's just always feeling like there's somebody out there that's better than me that can do this better. And as I've spoken to you two today, I'm really grateful for the feedback you've given and the kind words you've shared. Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing it. My practice is just, a random Black girl talking to other Black girls, but you're like the way you have, you know, taken my approach and really validated it and made it feel like it's therapy, as like it's helping me with my imposter syndrome. Thank you for that, because I came into this conversation with no expectations, but I've gained more than I thought I would. So thank you.
That's great to hear. I'm grateful you came on and that you took that leap, that you were willing to challenge yourself in that way and to be so aware of you're shrinking back and then you're stepping forward, and like feeling your way through it all along. So that's a real learning experience for me, because I think sometimes I shrink away from things when I could lean into it. And it is that sense of like, I need to have all these things checked, like the boxes checked. I got to be perfect. And to kind of be like, no, sometimes you can just show up and like you as a person, your lived experience is valid enough, and that I actually do have something to offer. And that's something I've learned through even doing this podcast myself. So I'm grateful that you stepped up to do it. I'm glad that we met you through this.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I share the same. And one of the things that I sometimes reflect on, I mean, I love this work, but it can be a little bit lonely at times or a little bit isolating. I have all these amazing connections with my clients, but they're my clients, they're not my friends, you know. It's just such a weird job that nobody really gets it unless you're talking to other people who get it. And I notice that I'm leaving this conversation feeling energized and connected to my creativity. And I've really enjoyed our I always enjoy our conversations, Michelle, but it's very, I feel very excited. I feel like we've spent some really exciting time together, and that's down to you, Sophia. So thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. We've loved having you on the podcast.
Please come back.
Come back. And where can people find you? Where can people find their next awesome therapist should they be in the market?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm on Psychology Today. My practice is called Soul Affirming Counseling Services. I think the information will be in the description. I'm always accepting new clients. Private practice is a passion of mine. It's right now it's a part-time or more casual than part-time, actually, because I do have a full-time job. But I love to support people. I love to be part of people's journey. And if you're looking for a therapist or somebody to help you like untangle life with, and you think that I could be of service, please reach out, and then we'll go from there and see how we go.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ladies. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.